You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. The coalition government has announced plans to allow parents to share paternity and maternity leave when they've had a baby. New mothers and fathers will be allowed to take 52 weeks off work after having or adopting a child. At the moment, mothers can hand some of their leave to fathers, but only when the child is 5 months old. But under these new rules, the new mum could choose to return to work more quickly and hand over unused allowance to the father. Dads will still be entitled to their 2 weeks paternity leave at the beginning. And these new rules are set to come into force in April 2015, so we thought we should discuss them on The Voice of Russia here in London. I'm joined in the studio by Dominic Ceraldi, HR Director at Pimlico Plumbers, which is an independent plumbing company with a workforce of around 200 staff, predominantly men. Lynne Burnham is Secretary of Mothers at Home Matter. And on Skype is Simon Smith, founder of Changing Dads, a life coaching session for fathers. I'll start with you, Simon Smith. What do these proposals really mean?
From what I can see, the proposals will allow both mothers and fathers to take maternity/paternity leave, parental leave, in a more flexible way than they do at the moment. As I understand the current rules, they can currently take, the mothers can take up to the whole time, or they can do 5 months and then the fathers can do a further amount of time. I think this is, for many families, this probably works already, but I think there are a lot of families for whom a greater flexibility is really the case these days. And I think the new rules would really help a lot of families in many different sorts of circumstances make the most of the parental leave that they have.
Well, this was announced by Nick Clegg, Deputy Prime Minister. He said it's good for families, good for business and good for the economy. Dominic Ceraldi, HR Director at Pimlico Plumbers. Good for the economy?
I don't think so. I don't think it's good for business, certainly small businesses. I just think the impact's going to be huge, and certainly on businesses where there are more men working in the workforce than women. We're about 70% men work for us, and it automatically doubles the amount of people who can take the leave, because men can now take it, if you see what I mean, if they are going to share it. And it could leave us really stretched if men if they decide to take it up, because we have no control over whether they want. If they want to take it, we would have to allow them to take it. I think majority of the guys who do work for us have got families already. It could be a massive impact on us, and filling those roles for that amount of time, however many weeks it is, with temporary staff, it's a huge cost implication. I think it could be a big burden on us. Realistically, we're not going to go bust because of it, but I think smaller businesses than us certainly could really, it could have a massive impact on them.
But I think that the overall amount of time that people can take for parental leave will be the same. So it could well be that particularly employers where a lot of women are employed, such as thinking primary schools, the nursing profession, for instance, may actually benefit from the rules, because women will feel as if they can go back to work maybe at an earlier stage, and therefore some businesses and certainly in many parts of the public sector may well actually benefit from the new rules.
Sorry, but I thought that the leave was different, because I think that at the moment men can take 2 weeks. They can ask for an extension, but they won't get paid for that. With this new ruling, they will get statutory maternity pay on it. So that has a major impact on men deciding to take it or not. I know statutory maternity pay isn't great, but it still means that they will get something. So I think more men may be willing to take it up, whereas now at the moment they're not. So for a small business, I think that can have huge implications with schools and companies that maybe have a high proportion of women working for them. They probably already have systems in place where they're prepared for it. I think for general manufacturing businesses and production companies, maybe where it is male dominated, it's going to really have a major impact on them.
Before we continue with that argument, Lynne Burnham, Secretary Bills at Home Matter, do you think these proposals are reflecting modern life?
Well, no, they are. Of course, they're reflecting modern life, but Mothers at Home Matter welcome choice to families that Clegg's announcement has given, but it should not be seen as demeaning motherhood. Motherhood should be celebrated, and mothers at home should be seen as progressive as it is to have a dad stay at home. At the moment, the current speak from government is, it's Edwardian, it's old-fashioned to have mum at home after the baby's born. I mean, where does this man live? On what planet does he live? A mother's carried this baby for 9 months. The baby is in tune with the mother at birth. The baby knows the mother's voice, knows the mother's smell. There is a bond there, and I've just come from a conference where we're talking about attachment and how important attachment is to the brain development of a baby. Now, that isn't to say that a father can't stand in and take over in an extreme circumstance if the mother sadly died in childbirth or the mother is seriously ill, maybe suffering from postnatal depression. But we need to get away from trends. This is nature. This is what nature intended.
Well, Simon, you interrupted. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I don't disagree with what Lynne's saying. Certainly, from my experience as a father, I agree with some of what she's saying, and I think in an ideal world, the mother spending at least 6 months on maternity leave at home, bonding with the child, would be great, and is as I say, in an ideal world. Unfortunately, we're not living in an ideal world, and I know that many families, are really struggling in this current financial climate, and it isn't always the case these days that the father is the greater money earner, and often these days it's actually the father who has been made redundant. I'm a living case of that. So it isn't a reflection of the modern times that this proposed legislation is coming in, but I feel it's kind of necessary in the current climate, because whereas I would wholeheartedly support a woman staying at home for as long as possible with a child, but that's just not a reflection of the reality on the ground for families these days.
I mean, Dominic, if you've got a workforce predominantly men, but potentially some of their partners might earn more than them, which might make it more economically viable that they take shared leave.
I think that might be the case in some instances, but I still think that, let's not lose track of reality here. In Britain, the government are always saying this, that the major bread earner in the family tends to be the man still. And I know certainly in London, and certain cities in Britain, that may not be the case, where, there's women on fantastic salaries. But I think if you look across the country, that isn't the case. I really believe that, it is the man who earns the money in the family in the majority of the cases. Great if it isn't, and we're all for that, and we're a company that promotes equal pay. However, it's not been the case with us in the last, with the current way it works. We've not had many men at all ask for extension on maternity leave, and I think if you ask most women, they're pleased that their husband goes back to work because they want him out of the house after 3 weeks, because 2 or 3 weeks, and I totally agree with Lynne on that. That it's my wife works in childcare. She has her own business. I told her I was coming on this show this morning. I asked her what her thoughts on it were. She said, when we had R2, I was glad to get rid of after 3 weeks, and it's a woman's place, and it's good because it's not demeaning women. That it's about promoting that looking after your children it's the hardest job in the world, and people who've got children know that it's so difficult, and I don't think men are up to it, to be honest.
I absolutely disagree with that wholeheartedly, because what I'm seeing with my clients coming into Changing Dad is that that kind of thing about getting the man out of the house is so bad for men's confidence, and it makes men feel isolated. It makes them feel rejected, and it makes men feel as if they aren't able to bring up their children. And I see quite a few men who come in and say, I really, really want to be more involved with looking after my children, but I really feel that the system's against me. That people think that automatically that the mother is better at bringing up the child than the father, and that leaves me feeling isolated, and it makes me feel it lacks my confidence, and therefore it's a circular spiral effect that as men are made to feel like that, then they act like that. They can become more withdrawn within the family, because men tend not to talk about these things. And which is one of the reasons I've set up Changing Dad, because to encourage men to talk about these things, because that they really feel as if they're not listened to. So I think that's while I agree with Dominic about a lot of the economic arguments, I can't agree with him about that.
But Lynne, your approach to this is that we should have value in the old-fashioned approach to parenting.
Well, yes, we should value motherhood. We should value what babies need. I mean, nobody's ever spoken about, none of the politicians, whether it's from the left or from the right, none of them have spoken about what the children need, what are the child's needs. And that surely must be paramount. That must be at the top of the list. It's all very well saying, oh, well, we need women to return to work because the economic climate suggests that we need more women in work. But we need to value the care. We need to value the understanding that a mother and a father need to care for their children. The father can undoubtedly play his role. There's no doubt that a father has a hugely important role in being there for his child, supporting the mother in the early days. But in the early days, it is crucial that the mother and the child bond. The WHO talk about ideals, and in an ideal world, the mother, supposing that she chooses to breastfeed, which is what everyone should be encouraging her to do, should breastfeed the baby for the first 6 months as a minimum. Now, the father is never going to be able to take on that role, not unless something changes dramatically in our evolution. So, why denigrate the role of the mother? Why say that the mother is as able to go back to work as the father? It's simply not true.
Right,
fathers come into their own much later on, when the children are a little bit bigger, when they're moving around, when they're crawling. The rough and tumble element that a father can provide is hugely important in the development of the children.
But what about mothers? You talk about mothers at home matter. What about mothers at home that matter but also want to go back to work, also don't potentially want to spend longer than 3 months breastfeeding? That alienates them, and this policy would give them a choice.
It doesn't alienate them at all. This, as I said before, we welcome the choice that this gives to families. But at the same time, there's the undercurrent from this government, as there is from other political parties, that it's old-fashioned. It's seen as something that's not to be celebrated. And that is not right.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. We're discussing potential new rules announced by the government giving fathers the option to share maternity and paternity leave with mothers. I'm joined in the studio by Dominic Ceraldi, HR Director at an independent construction company, Lynne Burnham, Secretary of Mothers at Home Matter, and Simon Smith, founder of Changing Dad's blog.
Well, I see it from a different angle to Lynne, I think. I don't see this as being a denigration of motherhood, because I think it's all about choice. I think that this legislation is not going to. We're not going to see a flood of women going back to work after 2 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I don't think in a lot of cases this legislation isn't going to make a lot of difference for families in the first 6 months. And I've already stated, I agree with Lynne, breastfeeding children for the first 6 months is very important. I wouldn't want to go against that message at all. But I also think that actually this legislation might mean that women stay longer before going back to work, because as I understand the current legislation, it can be switched at the moment, but it might be that women choose to go back to work after 9 months rather than the 5 or 6 months at the moment, and men do 3 months. So I think from that point of view, it's not clear cut that it's, and I don't accept that it's a denigration of motherhood. And I also will come back to the point I made before, that for some families, it in this current climate, in economic climate, it really is, they don't have an option. They really, this will really help them for where the mother is the larger or sole wage earner. And I'm seeing it more and more at the school gates, with more fathers who don't have jobs bringing their children and collecting them.
You know, can I just say here that the government are coming from a completely different perspective. They're seeing their wives, who are all high flyers. I mean, Nick Clegg's wife Miriam, she's a solicitor, lawyer. Samantha Cameron's been a high flyer in her time. You know, you've got to look at it from the general population. Most women do not have these high-flying careers that are going to carry on and are going to just fade away if they don't get back to work and lean in, as the current expression is, back into their job within 2 or 3 months of giving birth. That's just not reality. Their view is so skewed by their own personal circumstances. Their wives are out there, and they've got nannies, and they've got all the support that they can muster to make sure that the children are well looked after in their eyes, but it's just so skewed.
Would you say then, Dominic, you have a voice of your employees and people that work for you who the government aren't perhaps in touch with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said to you, you know, out of over the last few years, of all the men that work for us, I think we've had maybe 2 or 3 have asked for an extension on paternity leave, and they've had 3 weeks. So they've had an extra week, or maybe they've gone for a month. And if it's a month, it might be one person's asked for that. I just think they're really out of touch with it. I think that it's just more red tape. They bang on about Brussels and creating red tape, and they're going to smash it down. And this belt has come from Westminster, and it's not going to have much of an impact across the country. It may do for, as Lynne says, you know, people who've got high-flying jobs and partners with high-flying jobs. But for Joe Bloggs, the average person, it ain't going to really make much of a difference. But the problem businesses have is that they've no control over maternity leave, no control whatsoever, because if the woman becomes pregnant, then she becomes pregnant, and you've got to accept that she's going to go on maternity leave. That's fine, and we know that already, and they're the rules that are in place, and companies and businesses they're prepared for that. With the new legislation, you know, you could see your workforce depleted if you've got a lot of men working for you, and you've no real control over that. In the majority of those cases where the woman does earn more money than them, they're already prepared for that anyway. That couple, and the man will take the time off, you know, and it's already in place. I can't see
how legislating for it helps.
Yeah,
no.
I really don't. It's I just think the government are, you know, they sit there, the coalition, they're telling us how they want the backbone of the country is the small, medium-sized businesses. They want people to work harder. They want people to manufacture and build, and they're just sort of stabbing businesses in the back, I think, with it.
Simon Smith, you speak, though, that this is quite a practical solution.
Yeah, I think I do. I don't agree with Nick Clegg on much these days, but actually on this, I do see his point. I absolutely take the point that you know, the likes of him and George Osborne and David Cameron with their high-flying wives and you know, lots of nannies. You know, I can see why they think that from that point of view it fits. But I think it also fits other people as well, and I think it can fit families who are really struggling with their finances and with their income, and yet want to start a family as well. And I understand that from a business point of view. I've worked in public sector, private sector, and now I have my own business. That there are issues and there is red tape around this. But I'm looking at it from the point of view of the families, and I'm looking at it from the point of view of the dads who, okay, I agree, are in the minority at the moment, but that's because the expectations on fathers haven't been there. I think that this legislation will help to recognise that fathers can play a greater role in bringing up their children, and I think it's probably going to be a long-term thing. But I think gradually over time, this will encourage more men, because there are a lot of men out there, and you can see that from all sorts of things. The growing number of sites for fathers, growing number of dad blogs like the one that I do with Changing Dad, that there are more and more men who are and want to be more involved with bringing up their children. And I think this legislation will provide the sort of flexibility for families that will help to start make that happen.
But
go on.
Sorry, I think it totally conflicts with the government's childcare agenda, where they're trying to get people to put the children into childcare in regard so that they can get away from home and get into work and get the economy back on its feet. It's totally against what they've already set in place. And I mean, I can't see how more men staying at home is going to help the country in the long run. It's going to become soft. It's going to be people just not wanting to work again. What happens when the maternity leave runs out? Do they want to go back to work? They've had 6 months off, the fella. I mean, you may say it's an old-fashioned view, but it's the view that keeps the country on its feet, I suppose. It's the backbone of it.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. We're discussing potential new rules announced by the government giving fathers the option to share maternity and paternity leave with mothers. I'm joined in the studio by Dominic Ceraldi, HR Director at an independent construction company, Lynne Burnham, Secretary of Mothers at Home Matter, and Simon Smith, founder of Changing Dad's blog. Simon, what do you think to the fact that fathers are feeling more isolated? Talking about it on an emotional perspective.
I think that certainly fathers who do choose to stay at home, or in some cases for financial and other reasons, are staying at home to look after the children, do feel isolated. I remember writing something quite a while ago about in a soft play centre, for instance, mums go there to meet other people and dads sit there kind of staring at the phones, because it is quite an isolating thing. For many understandable and right reasons, bringing up children, and particularly in the first year, is a very female oriented thing. And for those dads who are involved in that, we find that most of the support, most of the kind of groups that you can go to are female dominated. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that because of that, men do feel isolated and don't feel able to join in a way that in a way that they could do. And I'm hoping that as maybe more men get involved in this, that this could change. But at the moment, men do absolutely feel isolated.
Yeah, I think you're right, but mothers feel isolated, and that's what we as a campaign group, Mothers at Home Matter, fight against, the isolation that mothers at home feel when a lot of their NCT partners or their antenatal, postnatal mums that they've met are all trolling back to work. This is, we feel the isolation just as much, and I would suggest that there are certainly a lot more fathers in playgroups these days than there ever used to be, and that's something to be welcomed. I agree with you. It's not something that's bad. If the father has been made redundant, or the father has chosen to be at home and perhaps do some work from home because there's a lot more homeworking going on, that should be celebrated. But we can't get away from the fact that a mother's right brain is much more in tune with the baby than the father. And no matter how much work you put into trying to get that attachment with the father and the baby in the early days, it's just not going to happen.
But that seems to sort of sign off quite a lot of fathers from doing anything or being involved very early on in cases where they have to be.
No, it doesn't. Of course, if the mother isn't available, if the mother's sick, if the mother has gone back to work, I'm not saying that that a baby can never grow into a rounded individual just because mum's not been there. But we're talking about generality here. We're trying to say that that fathers can step into the mother's role and the mother can step into the father's role as easy as that. It doesn't happen. We have our roles in life, and that's what nature's all about. We give birth to the children, and in the animal world, that's what's happened. The mother gives birth, the mother cares for that child, and the father's the protector.
Many differing opinions here and perspectives, which have been really interesting. I guess what I feel that is overriding, whilst perhaps, Simon, you think that the legislation is good, there is a level of people feeling that the current government is really out of touch with every angle and every part of where you're coming from on this, whether it's the manufacturing economy, construction, whether it's the isolation of mothers, or whether with Simon it's the isolation of fathers. So I'm going to finish now with, I'll start with you, Simon. Message to Nick Clegg.
Message to Nick Clegg is that I welcome this legislation, but I think that it has to go in hand in hand with other similar legislation that allows families to grow together as families. This helps families be more flexible and make the most of what they've got, but the government doesn't always help them in the broader sense with that.
Well, my message to Mr. Clegg is, if you truly believe that this government has families' best interests at heart, why are single-income families under this government, where the mother or the father stays at home to care for the children when they are young and at their most needy, why under this government are they so badly penalised in the tax system?
Lynne Burnham, Mothers at Home Matter. And finally from you, Dominic Ceraldi, HR Director at a construction company.
Message to Nick Clegg is you're asking businesses to be the backbone of the country, to get us back on track in a faltering economy, yet you've not taken into consideration the massive implications of cost that how it's going to affect small businesses.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, so on that note, I'd like to thank all my guests: Dominic Ceraldi, HR Director at Pimlico Plumbers, Lynne Burnham from Mothers at Home Matter, and Simon Smith, founder of the blog Changing Dads.